Chag Sameach, and welcome to the Shaar Hashomayim Shavuot learning program. The challenge of being apart from each other means that this year, for the first time in decades, there will be no all-night Shavuot learning at the Shaar. And usually on Shavuot, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's the sound of Torah study, there's learning from each other until the sunrise prayers. Every year I marvel at the devotion of those who show up, those who are there at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, at Stanley Goldstein, who each and every year organize our Shavuot program, the many who attend the dinner, the all-night learning, our teens who balance Torah study together with basketball and going outside to sing and tell stories. Always a very special night at the Shaar. Our kitchen staff, of course, always sending out our pizza and ice cream throughout the night just to keep us alert and keep us nourished. It's always a really, really special time. But this year, none of that will be. But this isolation creates opportunity. It creates opportunity to connect in different ways, to learn in different ways with different people. Even, and especially this year, we'll be learning with those who have very strong connections to the Shaar. We've reached out to former Shaar clergy. We've involved our own clergy. We present a program that includes many current and former clergy members who will each present a brief teaching related to our theme. And the theme we chose is community. That was the theme that's been challenging us for these last weeks as we've redefined what exactly community means to us and how we might relate to community in a different way once we're out of the current predicament. So I'd like to begin this learning session by presenting a text from Tractate Sanhedrin. The text says that a scholar should not reside in a city where the following things are not found, meaning the following are sine qua non. The following must exist for someone who is upstanding, for a scholar, for anyone to live in that city. They must have the following conditions. Number one, a court of justice that imposes flagellation and decrees penalties. The second is a charity fund collected by 2 and distributed by 3, and we'll explain what that means in a moment. And then a synagogue, and then public baths, and then a convenience, and then a circumciser. Literally, it says Raphael, a doctor, but as the commentators understand that, it means that someone who's entrusted with the ritual of circumcision, and then a surgeon, and then a notary, and then a slaughterer, and then a schoolmaster. Rabbi Akiva is quoted. The teaching continues that Rabbi Akiva adds something else. He says that also several kinds of fruits should be in the list because they're beneficial to the eyesight. And the premise is that in Talmudic times, there was precious little that one could do in isolation, including study. With the printing press more than 1,000 years away and books so rare, with the notion of a telephone call, not even a science fiction, let alone all the ways in which we communicate in more sophisticated ways, one had to ensure in those times that everything that we need is within walking distance, or at least distance that we could reach by horse and buggy, or however people were getting around. It had to be close by. Now, as the Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan wrote, we live in this global village, and everything is accessible. We don't need to leave this village for anything because everything is here. And it's been said that it's no longer even a global village. Now it's a global living room, a global home. Everything comes into our home. Amazon will bring anything to my house within a short period of time. But back then, living in a small village meant that what you had there was limited. And there were responsibilities to each other. For example, the responsibility to those within the community was such that one was not allowed to leave the town for Rosh Hashanah to go visit other people. If leaving meant that there would be no minyan left in the town, where you had to stay to make sure that there was a minyan. Where you lived determined how you lived, and therefore you have these conditions that must be in order for one to live there. And look at what a scholar should not live without. A court of justice. That means that society can't function without justice. And then a charity fund collected by 2 and distributed by 3. This is a system of internal controls within charity distribution, meaning there has to be transparency. Without transparency, there'll inevitably be corruption, and who would want to live in a place of corruption? So you have to give the charity with transparency, with accountability, with checks and balances. And then we have to take care of the spiritual and the physical needs in a communal sense. A synagogue, public baths, a convenience. The Rabbi Yaakov Emden in the 18th century wrote that it's not enough to have a private bathroom next to one's home. He said, as we have in our lands, that's a luxury, but a washroom must be provided for the public who pass in the streets, or those whose home is small and they don't have room to build one, as was the case for many Torah scholars at the time. And at first glance, it seems odd in this list to connect a synagogue to a restroom, to a convenience. But not at all, actually. Both are essential. You can't live without either. You can't live without spirituality. It's as essential as taking care of physical needs. And then we continue with the physical, with a circumciser, with a surgeon, with a notary for writing a Torah, with a slaughterer, and of course the schoolmaster. We have to take care of the children. And Rabbi Akiva then is quoted as offering that one has to have several kinds of fruits because they're beneficial to the eyesight. And that last clause is not sure if it's because it's good to look at, therefore beneficial to the eyes, that we take in aesthetic beauty, or because the eyes are an indicator of the overall health, and these fruits therefore are beneficial to health, and that would be the reason for having them. But either way, the text is instructive in terms of looking at what comprises community. And I'd love to hear from you in terms of what this text is missing, or how we might amend this text for modern times. What would be the essentials if when we're moving to a new community and wanted to live a fulfilled spiritual life, what would be the essentials that would exist within that community to allow for that fulfilled life? Community is a fluid concept. And even though there are certain aspects that remain constant throughout the years, it's instructive to think also and to challenge ourselves to think of this teaching through a contemporary lens. We'll now hear from past and current clergy of the Shaar reflecting on this theme of community. But first, I'd like to read a brief message from Rabbi Manny Forman in Jerusalem. And he wrote, "I received your request to join your Shavuot learning program and was truly moved. Even though my status was interim, I always felt part of the community. Indeed, the message I took away from our 5 years in Montreal was the message of community, of Kehillah. The long history of the Shaar, its ability to pass it on from one generation to the next, sometimes from one geographical location to another, was unique in the history of synagogues. For personal reasons, I'm unable to produce a videocast for your Shavuot program, but I do want to send Shavuot greetings from Jerusalem and hope for future opportunities to sing and dance together. And now, let's learn."
This is Rabbi Herbert Mandal. In 1971, I came to Shaar Hashomayim as a 26-year-old young assistant rabbi. The Shaar had not had an assistant rabbi since the mid-1940s. Rabbi Shuchat approached me, of blessed memory, with the idea of trying to create programming which would bridge the gap between young people and seniors. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Shaar was very much divided between an older community and a younger community. I came up with the idea of creating a Tikkun Leil Shavuot, an all-night study program, which did not exist on any major kind of basis anywhere in Montreal at the time. Rabbi Shuchat basically said, "Run with the ball." My goal was to try and blend the youth and the adults into one program. Up to that point, youth programming was separate, adult programming was separate at the Shaar. We created an evening that began around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night with seminars for adults and all types of programming, both recreational and educational for young people. You had to be around bat or bar mitzvah age to participate, which, by the way, made it a very tempting thing for younger kids to really want to get into the program. We had speakers from the community, and Montreal still does this wonderful community of scholars, and we had in-house scholars as well, someone like Michel Shore, who participated in the program at that time. There was food, there was singing, there was fun, and of course, in the morning at 4 a.m. or thereabouts, we had a sunrise service out in the back patio area, which had the sukkah as part of it at that time on the Metcalf side of the building. Very spirited, enthusiastic Yom Tov morning service. Unfortunately, it was so enthusiastic that we had complaints and the police arrived because there was too much singing for some of the neighbors right across the street at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. After that first year, we learned to temper that aspect of the program. It became more and more popular. Numbers increased. People were coming from other neighborhoods, staying with friends, participating in the program. And it just grew and grew and grew. It's a very spiritual, community-oriented evening. Your theme is community. This created a community, both within the Shaar and within the general Jewish community of Westmount and Montreal. It was a wonderful program. I'm proud that that is the legacy that I left at the Shaar. I created the same program here in Kansas City after I arrived here in 1977. It's 50 years later, and you're still going strong. I'm proud of that, and I hope you all enjoy your Zoom tikkun that we all were unfortunately forced to do this year, and hopefully next year, please God, you'll be back in person to enjoy a tikkun leil Shavuot. Good Yontif. Chag Sameach.
Dear friends of Shaar Hashomayim, Rabbi Shire, Cantor Zellermeyer, and all my fellow former clergy. What a wonderful idea that Rabbi Shire had to invite us all to record our thoughts during this extraordinary time in which we are forced to separate ourselves one from the other, at least physically, to distance ourselves. It is very easy to slip into isolation and loneliness. It is very easy when the doors of the shul are locked and we can't come together as a community in prayer to simply allow ourselves to become isolated, disoriented, and disaffected from the community. That is why a very brief, concise, but essential piece of advice found in Pirkei Avot, which we study every Shabbat during these weeks between Passover and Shavuot, is so important. Chazal say in Avot chapter 2, halacha 5, Al tifrosh min hatzibur. Do not separate yourself from the community. There are two essential words here in Hebrew. One is lifrosh, from the word parush or prushim, which means separate, separatist, isolationists, Pharisees in the negative connotation of which is found in other scriptures, not Jewish scriptures, but certainly in Christian scriptures. The Pharisees are portrayed as people who are aloof, who feel that because of their stage in life, their association with the temple, their superior learning, they did not have to be part of the unwashed masses, the hoi polloi. Al tifrosh min hatzibur is a warning precisely directed at such people with a great, perhaps rabbinical education, people who feel they're better than, they're not really interested in hanging around and schmoozing with people during the Kiddush or even talking during davening a little. It's an easy temptation, and I can speak personally, having come back from 29 years in exile, that when I had to decide where I was going to live after retirement back to Montreal, my temptation was Outremont. It's where I grew up. It's the town in which I feel most at home in many ways. And yet, because of its biculturalism, multiculturalism, because of the sound of French in the city, and the sounds of my childhood and youth, that's my real home. There was one problem. There was no tzibur. There was nothing for me in terms of a living Jewish group of people. I don't say community, because community is kahal. That's a different word. The kihila is the structured community. The kahal are those who are assembled in prayer, those who have bought tickets, those who have paid their membership. The tzibur is something else. The tzibur is a much more general and all-encompassing, I would say ecumenical concept. That you can be a member of the tzibur simply by identifying with the people who find themselves in shul. You don't have to necessarily identify with the institutions of the shul or all the programs of the shul. Simply a desire to be with a certain group of people. And so I found myself realizing that there's really only place I can live and not violate the advice of Pirkei Avot, Al tifrosh minat tzibur, and that was right here in beautiful Westmount, just in the only building, by the way, other than the Shaar, that has entrances on Kensington and Metcalf Avenues. Al tifrosh minat tzibur is not easy, especially for those who spent a lot of time, by definition, being exalted over the congregation. And so, kudos to Rabbi Shaar for inviting us former rabbis and former cantors to bring greetings. And yet, in the course of thinking of what I wanted to share with you, what became obvious was the struggle that some of us have, some of us former clergy may have, in truly staying part of the tzibur. Not necessarily the kahal, but the tzibur. The kahal is an institution. It has buildings, it has a budget, it has officers, it has employees. The tzibur is just a pile of people, literally a pile of people. A basket of non-deplorables, to riff on Hillary Clinton. A group of people who share one thing, and that is a desire for association, for social connection, for communal connection, and something distinctly Jewish, of course, in that connection when it comes to a tzibur like the Shaar Hashomayim. The word parush can be a wonderful, can connote a wonderful thing. In fact, in the Torah reading Kedoshim, which begins with the words Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem, be thou holy for I, the Lord, your Lord, am holy. The struggle of the commentators was, well, how can we be godlike? No man can be godlike, and the answer was, as found in the Midrash and found in Rashi's commentary, Prushim min ha'arayot. Kedoshim, to be holy, one has to separate oneself from that which is unclean. From that which is unclean, but not from that which is common. And so there is a very carefully calibrated line between that one must not cross over from being Parush min harayot, someone who separates himself from those who are unclean, and Prushim min hatzibur, and those who take it too far and say, well, I'm too holy, I'm too learned, I'm too educated, I used to be the rabbi of this shul, I'm not just going to be hanging around with the hoi polloi. And that's the urge that I fight when I come to shul every Shabbos, or most Shabbosim. That's the urge that all of us, each in our own way, have to constantly battle, especially in this time when we're being forcibly separated from the tzibur. I want you to think about the distinction between tzibur and kihila. The kihila will send you a bill to pay your dues. They will preserve a plot in the cemetery for you at Mea V'Esrim. They will sell you a seat in the sanctuary for the high holidays. But that's not tzibur. That tzibur are all of the people who simply find themselves together on any given Shabbat or Yom Tov in the community, davening together, eating together, sharing jokes and anecdotes and personal stories and updates. That's the essence of tzibur. I want to conclude with two common uses of the word tzibur, where the word kahal or kihila kedosha, kuf, which is used to connote a synagogue, a congregation. I want to share just two uses of that word, which are instructive. The sages warn against the agents of the community, whether they're the clergy or the officers of the community, engaging in tircha de tzibura. Tircha de tzibura. A tircha is a burden, an unnecessary burden, a supererogatory demand that really makes it hard for Jews to live their lives and to be part of a tzibur. If the davening goes too late, if the sermon or the musaf is too long, and so on and so forth. If the kiddush isn't sufficient to allow people to walk home filled with energy. Those are all categories of tircha de tzibura. We avoid making things difficult for the tzibur. For the membership, for the kahal, sure, raise the dues, make it very expensive, make it as difficult as you want. But when Chazal say al tifrosh min hatzibur, they're talking about the tzibur towards which the kahal has an obligation to make life beautiful and easy and make the association with the shul, with the community, enjoyable in every respect. Now, the other expression is found in Yakum Purkan. We pray Yakum Purkan means Shemaya, may God give us salvation from heaven, and there are 3 paragraphs. The first 2 paragraphs deal with the Kihila, with its officers, those who arrange for Kiddush and a candle for Havdalah, and who keep the space open, the officers of the congregation. But the last of the 3 paragraphs begins, V'chol misha oskim b'tzarchei tzibur be'emunah. V'chol, as well as those who deal in the needs of the community in good faith, tzarchei tzibur. Now those tzarchei tzibur are not what was enumerated earlier. The services, the kiddush, the open doors, a seat, a nice seat, an aliyah, that's kihila stuff. Tzibur stuff is simple humanitarian needs, the human needs of those who come. And that's what we have to focus on in this very difficult time. Taking care of our needs and not allowing the rules and the laws of this extraordinarily difficult moment, this COVID era, to allow us to drift away, to even inadvertently become prushim min hatzibur. That is my wish to you all. And it is something in which I am joining and doing my best not to allow ourselves to become or to be forced to be prushim min hatzibur. In this terrible time, I want to wish you all not only happiness and joy with you, with your families, but also to do whatever you can to make an extraordinary effort to remain part of the tzibur. I am doing my best to do that in my own way. I know that there are dozens of people who are volunteering and delivering meals. All of that is what the tzibur is about. Ultimately, in its original connotation, its first use in the Bible, in the Book of Kings, tzibur means a pile or a heap. It's actually beautiful. It's a pile of people. A pile of undifferentiated people, all equal members. Unlike in the Kahal, where there are officers and stations and degrees of holiness, with the Tzibur, everyone is the same. And so that must be our effort, and we must redouble it in a time when we're told we can't be together. Let us do everything we can to all remain part of this wonderful Tzibur that we call Shaar Hashomayim. Chag Sameach.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת עמך אהבת תורה תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת אותנו לימדת על כן השם אלוקינו בשוכבנו ונקומנו נשיח נשיח בחוקיך, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם, לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, והם נגד יומם ולילה. חיינו ואורך ימינו, והם נגד יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו, אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, לעולמים, לעולמים.
Shalom, Barry Gelman here. I am so pleased to be part of this virtual rabbinic reunion, if you will, and happy to share some Divrei Torah in honor of Shavuot, and thankful to Rabbi Shaar for including me in this wonderful project. I'll start with a story. Recently, a young boy from our community was hospitalized with a brain bleed, a young boy, second grade, pretty serious. He's actually still in the hospital, going on over 2 weeks at this point. And last week we held a virtual Tehillim group where we asked members of our shul community and his school community to come together on Zoom to recite some chapters of Tehillim and to pray for his recovery. And I'm happy to report that he is making great strides. He's out of ICU. And the Tehillim gathering was really very, very moving to see the numbers of people that came together on this little boy's behalf. And after the Tehillim call, the Tehillim Zoom group, if you will, the young boy's grandfather called me. He happened to have been on the call, led one of the chapters of Tehillim, and he called me. It was very emotional. The call was very emotional, and the grandfather was really moved. And he said to me, he said, you know, Rabbi, this is the power of community. This is the power of belonging to a community where people love you and they're willing to drop everything and take their time to care for you, to look after you, or in this case, to pray for you. And of course, I, as a Jewish professional, I'm sure all the rabbis who are offering Divrei Torah in this program, and I'm sure all of you who are watching understand, and I understood the importance of community before the grandfather said it to me. But to have him say it to me with tears in his eyes and so emotionally after such a moving event sort of concretized for me and really brought home the power of community. And when something like that happens, it's a good time for us to think about what we can do to strengthen our connection to community and to strengthen our communities. And Shavuot is really a perfect time to be thinking about the power of community. We often think about Ma'amad Har Sinai, the moment when God revealed himself to us and gave us the Torah at Sinai. We often think of that as a religious moment, right? God gave us the Torah and all the commandments, and we are from that moment on bound to follow the commandments and to perform the mitzvot and to do the best we can to be loyal to the legal system, right? The religious legal system that God set up for us. That happened there, and that is sometimes what is referred to as the Brit Sinai, the covenant of Sinai. But there's something else that happened at that moment as well, and that is the creation of a community. At that moment when God gave us the Torah, he didn't just give individuals 613 commandments. He created a community united by a vision of what the world can be. So that moment was not only a religious, legal moment, but it also represents the creation of the Jewish community where we're able to rally around the ideals and the values of the Torah. And the connection between Shavuot as that communal building moment and Megillat Ruth that we read on Shavuot is also very strong and expressed through the idea of community as well. I'll start with an idea from Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik notes that one of the ramifications of community, one of the halachic definitions of community, is that we are a chesed community, a community of kindness. We have responsibility towards each other. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh lazeh. All Jews are responsible for one another. That is not just a nice song that we sing and we teach our children to sing, although it's that too, but it is a halachic construct that was created. It's the way that we express the communal aspect of Judaism in halachic language. And that is connected directly to Megillat Ruth. There's a couple of really interesting rabbinic statements about why it is that we read Megillat Ruth. Let me begin just with a statement in general about what Megillat Ruth is. The Midrash Rabbah, Ruth Rabbah, says, Amar Rav Ze'era, Megillah zo, ein bo lo tuma, velo tara, velo iser, velo heter. This Megillah doesn't have anything regarding to purity or impurity or what's prohibited, what's permitted. V'lama nichteva, so why was it written? V'lamedcha kama sacharto l'gomle chasadim, to teach us the great reward in store for those who do acts of chesed. And if you go through Megillat Esther, of course, Megillat Ruth, you'll find it's entirely chesed, and we'll get to another rabbinic statement about that as well. So this Megillah that we read on Shavuot is a Megillah that talks about the reward due, reminds about the reward due for those who do chesed. And then specifically addressing why we read Megillat Ruth, another rabbinic source says, "V'lama korin Megillah zo b'chag Shavuot." Why do we read this Megillah on Shavuot? Shemegillah zo kula chesed. This Megillah is entirely chesed. V'haTorah kula chesed. And the Torah's purpose, I would say, is what this statement means, is to create kindness in the world. V'Torah chesed al lishonah, we say in Eshet Chayil. On the lips of the Torah is chesed. V'nitna b'chag HaShavuot. And the Torah was given on Shavuot. So the Torah, which is all chesed, was given on Shavuot, is twinned with the Megillat Ruth, which is to be read on Shavuot. So this idea that Har Sinai represented a dual moment, a legal moment and a communal moment, is expressed beautifully in these statements. Ruth does not have anything to do with halacha, according to this Midrash and Midrash Rabbah, but it has everything to do with chesed. And then comes the Torah, which is a combination, right? The Torah is a combination of course, law, halacha, and teaching us how to create a chesed society. And Rabbi Soloveitchik explicitly says in a beautiful passage, which I'll read in a moment, that we are connected to each other through the Torah. In talking about community and talking about the relationship between Jews, he says, how are we connected? He says, through Torah, which is and creates the continuity of all generations of Israel for all time. Rabbi Soloveitchik expands the notion of community, reminding us that Jews live in three dimensions, in the past, present, and future, and it is the Torah, the ideals of the Torah writ large, and in the case of Shavuot, focusing on the chesed community, on the building of a community around the idea of chesed, that the Torah speaks to. So, going back to that grandfather, he was right. There's great power in community. At this time of history, this very strange and odd and anxious time in history, I think it's a really, really good time to think about community. We're unable to gather as a community, and that's unfortunate. But whoever's watching this, we should consider ourselves, you should consider yourselves incredibly fortunate to be part of a community that all through these last couple of months, there has been a place that you can turn to, and a place that has turned to you to offer support. Those of us who are part of communities should feel so lucky that we're never alone, and especially at a time like this, we should feel the warm embrace of other community members, our community leaders, our synagogues, our other community organizations. So coming together, this all comes together with this incredible timing of the idea of Shavuot and Megillat Ruth and the corona pandemic crisis that we find ourselves in, and the ray of hope that belonging to a community gives us, and a sense of optimism that we march through this time hand in hand with each other. I wish you all a Chag Shavuot Sameach, and I wish you all the opportunity, the realization to understand just how fortunate we are to be parts of the communities that we live in. Again, Chag Sameach, and thanks for this wonderful opportunity.
The experience of Sinai, which we commemorate on Shavuot, was one of inspiration and excitement for the people of Israel. But what we don't often think about is the fact that it was also terrifying for them. I'd like to share with you two brief texts which demonstrate the fact that Sinai evoked a deep hesitation, uncertainty, and even fear for the people of Israel. And perhaps we can glean new insights from this aspect of the experience at Sinai. The first text is from the book of Exodus, Shemot. Right after the Ten Commandments are recording, the verse states, "V'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot ve'et halapidim." The people witnessed the thunder, the lightning, the blare of the shofar. The mountain was smoking, and when the people saw it, they fell back and stood at a distance. Vayar ha'am vayanu'u vayamdu merachok. They fled. Vayomru el Moshe, and then they said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will obey, but let not God speak to us, lest we die." They were afraid. Who could blame them? They were scared to hear God's voice directly. The experience of God's presence was too much for them to handle. The second text will elucidate their fears even further. This is much later in the book of Bamidbar, when the nation is departing Sinai. The text says, "Vayis'u mehar Hashem," and they traveled from the mountain of God, which seems to be a very simple fact, that they left Mount Sinai. But the Talmud picks up on the focus in this verse, which is where they were traveling from, as opposed to where they were heading towards. They were, of course, heading towards the land of Israel, but the verse simply states that they left Sinai. The Talmud remarks, "Vayis'u mehar Hashem," that they turned me'acharei Hashem, from being before God, and they hurriedly fled Mount Sinai. The people were eager to leave Sinai. Why would they want to leave? And why were they so terrified while they were there? The Ramban, Nachmanides, on this verse about leaving the mountain, quotes a midrash that elucidates this fear, this hesitation, the way the people felt about being at Sinai. The midrash says, "Shenas'u mehar Sinai besimcha." They left Sinai with joy, ketinok haboreach mibeit hasefer, like a child who is running away from school. Amru, they said, "Shema yirbeh v'yitin lanu mitzvot." If we stay much longer, he'll give us more commandments. The people are terrified at Sinai, and they're so ready to leave when they get the chance, not only because the mountain was filled with smoke and fire, but also because of the grave responsibility that the nation would now bear. For the first time, there are lofty demands being placed on these newly freed slaves. They are to keep God's commandments and be a light of morality to the world. It seems that God has faith in them, but perhaps they don't have faith in themselves. The analogy of a child fleeing school helps us understand that we need to bring the child back. They're avoiding something that's good for them. They're nervous, unsure of whether they will be able to live up to God's expectations of them. But we are rooting for them to stick with it, for we know they will rise to the occasion. The next time we find ourselves avoiding something that we know is good for us, let's remember that that kind of avoidance is human nature. Indeed, it is as old as the Torah itself. Maybe this can help us drag ourselves back to the mountain, so to speak, back to the work that the world needs us to do, back to improving the aspects about our character that need work, back to the mitzvot, even back to the gym. Get back to the mountain, because God has expectations. And just by keeping us here on this earth, God is letting us know that we are up to the challenge. Chag Shavuot Sameach. Happy Shavuot.
Hello to all my friends at Shaar Hashomayim. I am Chaim Dovid Berson. Miss you all. Honored to be with you tonight. And I hope we can get together in person really soon. וזכני לגדל בנים ובני בנים חכמים ונבונים אוהבי השם יראי אלוקים אנשי אמת זרע קודש בשם דבקים וזכני לגדל בנים ובני בנים חכמים ונבונים אוהבי השם יראי אלוקים אנשי אמת זרע קודש בשם דבקים ומאירים את העולם בתורה ומעשים טובים ובכל מלאכת עבודת הבורא ומאירים את העולם בתורה ומעשים טובים ובכל מלאכת עבודת הבורא ומאירים את העולם בתורה ומעשים טובים ובכל מלאכת עבודת הבורא ומאירים את העולם בתורה ומעשים טובים ובכל מלאכת עבודת הבורא ומאירים את העולם בתורה ומעשים טובים ובכל מלאכת עבודת הבורא ומאירים את העולם בתורה ומעשים טובים ובכל
Hello, dear friends of Congregation Shaar Hashomayim. I'm speaking to you from my home in Jerusalem, where we have actually had a heat wave here for the last 5 days, and also wait with anticipation for all the isolation to finish and for us to come back to our normal lives again. I would like to start this discussion on community with a story. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain, tells a story that during his tenure as chief rabbi, he met on a few occasions with Prime Minister Tony Blair. And Blair was a religious man, and still is, and a man of the book. And he said to Rabbi Sacks, would you like to meet to talk about the Bible? Rabbi Sacks said, it would be an honor. You're prime minister of my country. And they met. And for quite a while, they were meeting on a weekly basis, studying the Bible together. Well, they were reading the book of Shemot, of Exodus, and they came towards the end. And then Mr. Blair said to Rabbi Sacks, he said, here it comes again, that boring stuff. And Rabbi Sacks says, what are you referring to? He says, well, you know, talking about the tabernacle and how they built it and every piece, it really does seem to go on. Rabbi Sacks said to Prime Minister Blair, he says, that's true. But let me tell you why, what I think. He says, please do. He says, look, let me put it this way. When God created the universe, it's recorded in the book of Genesis in 22 verses. And now we're reading about the building of the temple. It's given 4.5 portions in the Torah, in Hebrew, parshiyot. Obviously, for the infinite God to build a finite world, it's easy, 22 verses. But for a finite person to create a house for the infinite God, that's really difficult. After telling this story, Rabbi Sacks said, even though I gave him an answer, the question really bothered me for a long time. And eventually I wrote a whole book about it, he said. He said, because what I realized was that there's the idea of creating the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was really a brilliant idea. You see, the 12 tribes coming out of Egypt had to look for some uniting factor. The 12 tribes and the multitude, the Erev Rav of the Egyptians, the mixed multitude, they needed something to unite them. And how do you unite people? They need a shared cause. So by having everybody get involved in the building of the tabernacle, by giving money, by supporting, by the motivation, so this shared cause helped to bring these tribes together. And Rabbi Sacks said, community needs a shared cause in order to bring it together, in order for it to unite. What is the meaning of community from a Jewish point of view? Well, we have 3 different types of kiddusha. We have kiddushin, when a man and a woman decide to create a family together. You have the word holiness. That's the first type of community, which is the family nucleus. Then we have another one called Kedusha, which is something we say in the prayers, the Kedusha, which you need at least a quorum of 10 men. You need a community in order to experience this Kedusha, this sanctity of prayer. And then you have another one, which is called Kaddish, which is a prayer that we say over a direct relative who was deceased, also uses the term Kedusha, sanctity. And my interpretation of this is that there are 3 types of communal sanctities. One of them, of course, is Kiddushin. It's the family nucleus, which is its own type of community. The second one is the Kedusha itself, meaning the prayer that we say in the Shemona Esrei together with the community, meaning there's the holiness of community, there's holiness of family and holiness of community. And then there's the Kaddish, which is the holiness of the realization that we are all one long line of being from the previous generations to the generations that will be. The link of this generations also is a certain type of Kedusha, and therefore we have this special prayer. So in that sense, Judaism is very community-oriented. And because we're community-oriented, I think we've had a difficult time during the coronavirus, which has really isolated the possibilities of community. And I think one of the things we've discovered, or at least I think I've discovered during this time, is that you have two concepts of community going on. Communities that need edifices and communities that don't. Remember, when the Torah says to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle, God says through Moses, Ubanuli mikdash, they shall build me a temple, v'shachanti b'tocham, but I shall dwell in their midst, not in the temple's midst. The temple is the tool to bring the people together so that God can dwell within the people. But sometimes people think that the idea of the temple is an authoritarian to tell the people what to do. These mistakes happened in the first temple. When Jeremiah told the people that the temple might be destroyed, they said, how can it be? Heichal Hashem Hema. It's the oracle of God. He's not going to destroy his own house. Jeremiah said, remember what happened to Shiloh? Could happen again in Jerusalem. And Isaiah went on to saying, who needs these sacrifices? I didn't ask you for that when we left Egypt. So you have people see community as authoritarian. And they're the ones, I think, who don't understand that sometimes community must disband in times like now. But then there's community, which is shared responsibility. And this type of community can survive even when the edifice is not at its service and at its use. At this point, I also want to commend the Shaar Hashomayim community, which has beautifully proven that even when the edifice is locked with lock and key, there's beautiful outreach to the community, to the elderly, who are not only helped with meals, but also with people calling up and asking how they are, to people stuck at home who need food, who maybe don't have the means. This beautiful outreach program, which has been going on at the Shaar during this time, I think is the epitome of the paradigm of community of shared responsibility. So what I would like to say then is one other idea. You see, Immanuel Levinas, who was a Jewish-born French philosopher, said that why does the verse say in Leviticus, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Hashem? Why does it say in Vayikra, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, I am God? What is the addition, I am God? You can say, love your neighbor as yourself. What Levinas said was, the problem of human beings is that we're egocentric. Possibly rightly so. We're worried about ourselves. We're worried about our own problems. It's really hard for us to look out of our shells and see somebody else out there. But a person who is able to walk out of their 4 cubits of egocentricity and realize there's somebody else out there who actually has pain, somebody else out there who might have problems even more than my own, and be sensitive to it, then you have discovered God. Then Ani Hashem. Then I, God, am also interested. Because if you realize that there's somebody else outside your 4 cubits, then you can also come in interface with God too. So this idea of community, of shared responsibility, is something as we approach Shavuot, the holiday, which is called the holiday of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, where the Jewish people stood united, Am echad b'lev echad, as one nation, like one man and one heart. So again, we try to understand through these difficult days the inner meaning of shared responsibility in community and how it will bring Kedusha into our lives and the lives of others too. And I wish everyone Chag Sameach.
Shalom. It's a pleasure to be with you as we celebrate Zman Matan Toratenu, a time when we renew our relationship with the Torah and really with the entire Bible, the entire Tanakh. The Tanakh is full of names, going back all the way to Genesis with Adam and Eve and through the books of Chronicles of Divrei Hayamim, mentioning so many characters along the way by name. In fact, the rabbis find great significance not just in the names of individuals, but also in the names of those individuals who are not mentioned by name. In other words, when a name is omitted, what does that mean? We find an interesting name omitted at the beginning of the second chapter of Megillat Ruth, the book of Ruth, which we read on Shavuot. Boaz arrives in the field. As he begins to fall in love with Ruth, as he sees her, he says, L'mi ha'na'ara hazot? To whom is this woman? Who is she? And who does he say this to? L'na'aro hanitzav al hakotzrim. To his lad in charge of the reapers. Who's this lad? Why is he not mentioned by name? The lad responds, Vayan hana'ar hanitzav al hakotzrim vayomar, and he says, Na'ara Moaviyahi ashava im Naomi mistei Moav. She's a Moabite woman who's returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. And the rest of the day, she's come here, and she's continued to harvest the grain that we, the reapers, have left behind. Why is he not mentioned by name? Interestingly, there's a second character whose name is not mentioned directly in our small, short book of Ruth as well. At the beginning of the fourth chapter, Boaz finds the Goel, the Redeemer, the one who has right of first refusal to take over Elimelech's land. And he goes to him, and he says, would you like to take this land? He doesn't call him by his name that you'd expect him to call him, whatever that name is, and we don't even know what that name is. What he says is, Ploni Almoni. Now perhaps this man's name really is Ploni Almoni. But Ploni Almoni in Jewish tradition has come to mean John Doe, Mr. X, the unnameable one. And he says to Ploni Almoni, would you like to take over Elimelech's land? You have rights to first refusal. Ploni Almoni responds, of course, I'd love to take Elimelech's land. Who doesn't want more land? And then Boaz continues and says, on the day when you take over Elimelech's land, you also have to marry Ruth, the Moabite. And at that point, Ploni Almoni responds, whoa, hold on. That changes everything. Marrying Ruth is going to change around my inheritance for my family. I don't want to get involved with that. I'm not going to marry the Moabite woman. With that in mind, let's look back for a moment at the response of Hanar Hanitzav al hakotzrim, the lad in charge of the reapers, the unnamed lad. Vayan Hanar Hanitzav al hakotzrim. Boaz says, who is this woman? And the Na'ar responds, the lad responds, Vayomar, Na'ara Moaviyahi hashava im Naomi mistei Moav. She is a Moabite woman who has returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. To paraphrase, she's a foreigner who has returned with Naomi from a foreign land. Vatomer, and she said, Alachtana va'asafti va'amorim acharei hakotzrim. I'll come along and I'll follow after the reapers and collect what they've left behind. Vatavo v'ta'amod me'az haboker, and she's come and she's been here all day long. Ad ata. Zeh shivta habayit ma'at. She's barely taken a break. All day long, she's continued to harvest, continued to take more and more. V'na'ar hanitzav al hakotzrim and Ploni Almoni, John Doe, these two characters not mentioned by name, both see Ruth as a foreigner, as someone who has come to take, and not as someone who is worth being named. It's interesting that these are the two characters whom our text chooses to anonymize. The two individuals who see Ruth as a foreigner, as a taker, not as someone worth being naming, not as a full-fledged member of the community, not as someone who's converted to the Jewish people, not even as someone who is a stranger who's come and is participating in our life as a people in some way in our community. It's these two individuals whom the text anonymizes as well. When we think about community, we often think in terms of what is it that someone is trying to contribute? What is it that someone has the opportunity to give to our community? I'll suggest that the power of our story of Ruth is in thinking about each individual and seeing their contribution to the Jewish people, to the larger community, not thinking about where they've come from, but the potential that they have to give to those around them and to bring something new, something inspiring to community. In that way, we find an opportunity to name each and every individual, not to see them as outsiders, but to recognize the opportunity to bring them in as well. Chag Sameach.
What is Tikkun Leil Shavuot? Tikkun Leil Shavuot literally means the fixing or the repairing of the night of Shavuot. According to tradition, we overslept the morning of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, our first Shavuot in essence. And in order to correct this behavior, the Kabbalists, and in particular this tradition is attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, instituted an all-night learning session on the night of Shavuot. In effect, we cover what is the Reader's Digest to Jewish text. This compendium includes the opening and closing verses of the 5 books of the Torah, as well as important passages such as Aseret HaDibrot and the Shema, opening and closing verses of the books of Nevi'im and Ketuvim, various oral text, and Kabbalist scriptures. Now, public Torah reading has become the centerpiece of many of our services, and most scholars agree that it was Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe, upon returning from exile of Babylon, that instituted public reading. He did this in order to reestablish a connection, not only with Israel, but also with the Torah, and to make sure that the Torah remains a living legacy. There is a debate about the purpose and the nature of public Torah readings. Is it a ritual that the reader accomplishes on behalf of everyone present, or is it a public Torah learning session? Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik recalled that a congregant once asked his father, Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik, this particular quandary. He said that he and the Torah reader once had a little scuffle. And what ensued was that the Torah reader told this person that when he reads the Torah, he reads it for everybody there except for this particular individual. And so this individual went to Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik and asked him, should he go to another synagogue and listen to the Torah reading there in order to fulfill his obligation? Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik said, no, you stay right here in this congregation and listen to the Torah reading. Because by you listening, you accomplish and you fulfill your obligation, as the public Torah reading is a public Torah learning session. And so I would like, in honor of the Chag of Shavuot, to read the opening and closing verses of the 5 books of the Torah. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz ve'haaretz hayet hatohu vavohu ve'choshech al penei tehom ve'ruach Elohim merachefet al penei hamayim vayashba Yosef et bnei Yisrael lemor פקוד יפקוד אלוהים אתכם, ועליתם את עצמותיהם מזה, וימות יוסף בן 110 שנים, ויחנתו אותו, וישם בארון במצרים. ואלה שמות בני ישראל הבאים מצרימה, את יעקב, איש וביתו באו, ראובן, שמעון, לוי ויהודה. ואם לא יעלה ענן ולא ייסעו עד יום העלותו, כי ענן אדוני על המשכן יומם, ואש תהיה לילה בו לעיני כל בית ישראל בכל מסעיהם. ויקרא אל משה וידבר אדוני אליו מאוהל המועד לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, אדם כי יקריב מכם קורבן לאדוני מן הבהמה, מן הבקר ומן הצאן, תקריבו את קורבנכם. לא יבקר בין טוב לרע ולא ימירנו, ואם המר ימירנו והיהו תמורתו, יהיה קודש לא יגאל. אלה המצוות אשר ציווה אדוני את משה אל בני ישראל בהר סיני. וידבר אדוני אל משה במדבר סיני באוהל מועד באחד לחודש השני בשנה השנית לצאתם מארץ מצרים לאמור, שאו את ראש כל עדת בני ישראל למשפחותם לבית אבותם במספר שמות כל זכר לגולגלותם. ממשפחות בני מנשה בן יוסף היו לנשים, ותהי נחלתן על מטה משפחת אביהן. אלה המצוות והמשפטים אשר ציווה אדוני ביד משה אל בני ישראל בערבות מואב על ירדן יריחו. אלה הדברים אשר דיבר משה אל כל ישראל בעבר הירדן במדבר בערבה מול סוף בין הפרן ובין התופל ולבן וחצרות ודי זהב 11 יום מחורב דרך הר שעיר עד קדש ברנע. לכל האותות והמופתים אשר שלחו אדוני לעשות בארץ מצרים לפרעה ולכל עבדיו ולכל ארצו ולכל היד החזקה ולכל המורה הגדול אשר עשה משה לעיני כל ישראל. חג שבועות שמח.
Hello everyone there in Canada, Montreal. Wish you all the best. Sitting here on my porch with my little succulent collection. Jerusalem is behind me. Outside you might hear some kids on my porch. There's some kids playing around. It's all lively, and want to say hello from Israel and Chag Sameach, Chag Shavuot Sameach. Mashiv l'Adonai kol tagmuloi alai kos yeshuot esa ובשם אדוני אקרא משיב לאדוני כל תגמולו היא עלי כוס ישועות אשא ובשם אדוני אקרא נדרי לאדוני השלם נגדנה לכל עמו יקר בני אדוני המבטלה חסידיו אנא אדוני כי אני עבדך אני עבדך ונעמתך פיתחת למוסרי אנא אדוני כי אני עבדך אני עבדך בנעמתך פיתחת למוסרי לך אזבח זבח תודה ובשם אדוני אקרא נדרי לאדוני השלם נגדנה לכל עמו בחצרות בית אדוני בתוככי ירושלים בתוככי ירושלים Hallelujah.
It has been said that Judaism is a tradition of minimum text and maximum interpretation. Take the 3 words from Vayikra, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your neighbor as yourself. How clear is that? How straightforward, simple, universal. Let me tell you a story about volunteering. A farmer's barn catches fire. The county fire department was called to put out the fire. Due to the dry heat and the surrounding grassy area, the fire was more than the county fire department could handle. Someone suggested that a nearby volunteer group be called. Despite some doubt that the volunteer unit would be of any assistance, the call was made. The volunteers arrived in a dilapidated old fire truck. They rumbled straight toward the fire, drove right into the middle of the flames, finally coming to a loud and screeching halt in the middle of the barn. The firemen jumped off the truck and frantically started spraying water in all directions. In just minutes, they had snuffed out the entire fire. Watching all this, the farmer was so impressed with the volunteer fire department's work and so grateful that the rest of his farm had been spared. Right there on the spot, he presented the volunteers with a check for $1,000. A local news reporter rushed to ask the volunteer fire captain what the department planned to do with the funds. Wiping the ashes off his coat, he replied, "That should be obvious. Fix the brakes." The Shaar is fortunate to have leaders of the clergy and many volunteers. There are teams involved in calling members who may be shut in, who might need help with meals which the Shaar has been providing. They've been involved in grocery shopping for the elderly and just so much more. Each act of giving that takes place in the community reinforces just how significant the volunteer act is and invites us to explore what are the sacred dimensions of Gemilut Chesed, acts of generosity, acts of kindness. Those who study such things have come to define a volunteer as one who chooses to act on the recognition of a need with an attitude of social responsibility and without concern for profit, going beyond one's basic obligations. Our rabbis taught, Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze B'Zeh. Each one of us is responsible for the other. I recently saw pictures of yeshiva boys from Kiryas Yoel, that is from the Satmar community. They were in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, giving blood to help anyone who might need life-saving blood. The religious community, especially the Hasidic groups, because they are so insular, have been hit much harder than the other communities. What can be done to prevent this from happening again? Although the Torah clearly and often states that guarding one's life takes precedence in almost any situation, the religious community is not comfortable taking orders from a secular government. It is imperative that the community follow the health experts. But in order for this to happen, the instructions have to come from their own rabbinical leaders. I believe that the government and health experts have to sit down with the religious leaders and present the facts to them in a way that they can understand. Then they will want to instruct their communities to follow these instructions. If, as it seems, the extra heavy death toll came to the religious communities because of not following the rules, then this alone will prevent it from happening again. At this time, we are connected to more people than ever before, and therefore we see more pain and distress than ever. With the media in action 24 hours a day, reporting so much tragedy, we react too quickly, running in our minds from one catastrophe to the next, without ever thinking how we should respond. As random as it all may seem, there are ways to find order and meaning in the world, without having our essential foundations shaken each time we hear of some new tragedy. I believe that we are keenly paying attention to what is happening in the world today, and quite simply, the world has more needs, even more than we can currently bear alone. 6 billion human lives are an unconscionable number to keep track of, let alone attempting to satisfy the sheer enormity of 6 billion needs. Our hearts and our minds are under tremendous stress. Choosing to act in the recognition of a need is a powerful, life-affirming step. The real complication today is that there are an infinite amount of volunteer opportunities, and which cost to choose is daunting. What you do with each choice can bring more order and light into the world. It is Maimonides who offers us sage guidance. One who settles in a city for 30 days becomes obligated to contribute to the charity fund together with the other members of the community. One who settles there for 3 months becomes obligated to contribute to the soup kitchen. One who settles there for 6 months becomes obligated to contribute clothing with which the poor of the community can dress themselves. One who settles there for 9 months becomes obligated to contribute to the burial fund to provide all of their needs for burial. Social responsibility is a loaded term. It no longer encompasses the neighbor next door or on your block or the destitute in your city. To be socially responsible today means taking responsibility in the world, and finding the time to do that is nearly impossible. Volunteer engagement is a term that has found its way into lexicons of corporations. Synagogues all over the world are speaking at great length about volunteerism, and entire communities are built simply on the notion that to belong to the community, you must commit a certain amount of hours of your time to some volunteer effort. We call these mitzvah projects tikkun olam and avodah, translated as sacred work. We are told, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, it's not upon you alone to finish the work, but you're not to turn the other way. We must be careful not to allow our emotions to get the best of us as we make our way through the coming months. I think the best way to react to this is clinically as opposed to emotionally. We can't feel our way through a pandemic. It doesn't matter to the virus whether you feel panicky or you feel optimistic. It matters how you conduct yourself and what you do. Panic tends to blunt our moral instincts. We don't want to do that now because we have to project to the time when this will be over. We must try to do as much as we can to keep people engaged and still be part of a community, even though that crucial physical contact has to be suspended. The question is, how do we go about ensuring that we stay focused and stay connected? There is a distinction between social distancing versus physical distancing. We should keep our physical distance to stay safe, but we should be engaged in coming together to stay connected. If someone is in need, we must respond. We have to figure out what to do in the next 30 to 60 days about so many things. We do not want to see desperation on the part of large numbers of people. Some good will come out of this. Maybe a lot of good will come out of this. If it teaches people how easily diseases are transmitted, that will be a good thing. Finally, I'd like to conclude with a story about 2 silver amulets that reside in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. They were discovered in an area outside Jerusalem in the valley of Gehenna, in what the ancient Canaanites used for the sacrifice of children to their gods. They were dated to around the year 586 BCE, when the first temple was destroyed. The amulets bear the ancient words of the temple's priestly blessing, which reads, "May the Lord bless you and keep you. May God's countenance shine upon you and be gracious to you." In other words, from the oldest bit of terror that existed then, we have the optimistic priestly blessings. As we are about to celebrate the festival of Shavuot, we read of the receiving of the Torah some 3,300 years ago. The The Torah uses the word to describe the Jews at Mount Sinai, Vayichan, which is the singular form of the word meaning encamped. The Torah should have used the word Vayachanu, the plural form, they encamped. The great commentator on the Torah, Rashi, explains that they were of one heart as one person. This was the only time in the 40 years of wandering in the desert that the singular term was used. This was God's great revelation to not only the Jewish people, but to all the nations of the world. As we continue to experience the effects of this horrible pandemic and our religious life, which has been so disrupted, let us all hope that we are safely delivered from this plague of biblical proportions sooner than later. And let us return to our shuls to celebrate Shabbat and our holidays as we have before. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.
We're grateful that you joined us for this Shavuot learning session. What a treat to reconnect with so many who remain so special to and connected with our Shaar community. We wish everyone a holiday of health and inspiration, and may we learn together in person very soon. Chag Sameach.